Welcome to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld. My guest today is Ren Pope. Hello, Ren. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Lou. How are you?
Doing all right. Excited. It's a beautiful day here in Brooklyn. In fact,
Yes.
it's kind of a summer day in spring, which, to be honest, I'm not so sure how I feel about. But I'm really excited about something you're involved in that I'm also involved in, and that's the Enterprise UX Conference, the reboot, the return of Enterprise UX, which is happening June 6th and 7th. And Ren, you are one of our speakers, and I'm
Yes,
happy
I
to
am.
welcome you to the program, the conference program, as well as the podcast program.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, let me introduce Ren. If you're a member of the information architecture community, you've probably met Ren or heard him speak at the IA conference at one point or another. Ren has a passion for all things data, information, and knowledge. Not surprising, given your experience in the IA world. Ren strives to make information more accessible, organized, and I like this word, enduring. And he's been doing this for 30 years. So, Ren, you are someone who's actually had in your job title the word ontologist. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Now, that's first of all, like, none of you listening can see me doing I'm saluting and giving me Ren the hands of respect. But let's talk a little bit about that word, ontology,
Okay.
in the context
Mhm.
of actual applied work in this digital world we live in. What's an ontologist do? And is it very different from what an information architect or even an interaction designer or a knowledge manager might do?
Well, I would say that they are, if a coin could have more than two sides, I think that they're different sides of the same coin, and with just little different nuances. So I really like the word, and I really like the way that the community has embraced information architecture and specifically focusing on the word architecture. And out of all of the architectures that aren't building architecture, the traditional, what we think of building, office buildings or houses or what have you. You have enterprise architecture, you have system architecture, application architecture. I think information architects have really embraced the word architecture and looked back to the building architecture roots. And if you take a look at building architects, you can build a building, which could be an office building or a house. You could be an interior designer, you could be a landscaper, all under the purview of architecture. And I look at information architecture the same way. I am an information architect, but I focus on the information and knowledge part of that, of information architecture. You could focus on the design part, which gets more into UX or information design. You could get really down more towards the structure and databases as well too. So it's a big tent. And I've kind of dabbled in all of the different spaces, but over the last 10 years, I've really focused on ontology. So that was kind of like, I think, a long-winded way of me kind of framing it. But so what is an ontologist? What's the app? How's it applied in today's world? Well, it comes out of philosophy,
Hmm.
ontology, which is the science of what is real and what's not real. That's what ontologists did in classic Greece. So they were concerned about things of the human being. Though that's kind of easy to say that's real. We see each other every day, but when you get things to like emotions, color, things that you really can't touch, they wanted to say, is that real or not? And how do you describe that? So now that we're in the modern day, how does that apply? Well, um, especially in the digital world, we're creating things. We're out of, in a computer, you really can't touch the things that are in there, but we have to be able to describe them. That's why we say things like files, and we have the little filing cabinet way back when you had the filing cabinet icon. We had to be able to describe these things and create kind of like a new world, a new environment for this cyber landscape that we're in. So, and a modern applied ontologist helps define things and how you use them and how they're related to things. So it's easy to design systems, to overlay on top of a set of information and data so that you can search and navigate it. So that's the elevator pitch for a very tall building, I guess.
I love it. I love it, and I love that you brought the classic roots into this, and what is real is like becoming an immense question that I don't think the classical philosophers had any clue of. Obviously, they didn't when prior to the digital age. But would it be um, oversimplification to say that an ontology is an agreed upon, like an agreement in, let's say, an organizational context, an agreed upon set of nouns and verbs to describe that organization and the things it
Yes.
touches?
Yeah, yes. I wouldn't say that it's oversimplified, but it's simplified. Yes.
Okay. Wow. Because I tried asking a professor to just explain ontology to me back in grad school, and he could have saved me a lot of time with that. Um, so good. It only took me 35 years, but finally got there. So, okay. Now let's talk about that organizational context. So, you've worked with and in large enterprises.
Yes.
And I have too. And in my experience as an IA consultant back in the day in enterprises, that the big challenge for an enterprise in many cases is just to get its arms around the nouns. What is it? What are the things? And if they can get that far, the things being roles, the things being departments or silos or functions, the things being what flows, whether it's money or resources or whatever. But then there's the verbs. I mean, are enterprises actually developing ontologies that go beyond the stating of the what, the nouns, and moving beyond that to really get into the nitty gritty of how those things connect?
Right. So there's the two key pieces of the ontology and your that description of the nouns and verbs. So I think we have been very good at defining the nouns, right? Relational databases have done that. You define something, you define what ends up becoming the metadata about that thing, and that's been kind of like well established. Now how things kind of work back and forth between each other, yeah, that takes there's a couple of challenges, because when you establish a relationship between something, right, you can have more than one relationship
Hmm.
between two things. Let's give a fictitious there's a mother who has a son. There's a relationship, that's a relationship, but let's say they have a small business. The son works for the mother. That's another relationship. So then there's qualities to that relationship. Uh, um, how long has the son worked for the mother?
Hmm.
Is that a quality of the relationship, or do you create another noun which is called employment, and that has metadata, and that sits between the mother and the son. So um, those are kind of like some of the challenges, I think, as ontologist and playing with others. So those in like systems development, the end user, those are all challenges that we have to work with, um, and work through, um, to be able to provide the best set of information in the most clean and efficient manner.
So, what I'm getting from this discussion, at least of the nouns part, you mentioned metadata, and the nouns have to be in place to power the verbs or to
Mhm.
give the verb something to hang on to grab
Right.
onto. But the metadata are really important as a way to help figure out, how a thing could relate to another thing. A mother and a son, a mother
Mhm.
who's an employer versus a son who's an employee. You add those metadata in, and it changes the verbs that connect them dramatically.
Right.
So one of the things that I'm always curious about is when it comes to that possible universe of metadata to describe any individual object. Um, it seems like you're sort of fighting a couple of battles on really on two different fronts. One is, well, there's a lot of different kinds of metadata that can be associated with any object, and they're
Mhm.
expensive, especially the more they tend toward the descriptive rather than,
Yes.
this thing is, made of carbon or not is a little simpler than this thing is um, about philosophy or versus about literature. Those are where things get a bit messier. But there's another front, and that is the fact that there's like a spectrum of meaning where if you take an object, let's say it's a document, it's got
Yes.
meaning on its own,
Mhm.
but representing that meaning is sometimes you need some kind of metadata, or you need a summary or an abstract, and you need there's like a spectrum. Like you could
There.
invest heavily in representing a piece of information.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think one of the ways to help look and frame that spectrum is structure, right? So, on one end of the spectrum, you have unstructured, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you have highly structured. So, a document would kind of lean more towards unstructured, right? There's not a lot of waypoints in there. You have to read the document to kind of understand
Hmm.
it and get it. And highly structured would be a relational database, right? So you find the row that you need, you find the column, which the number of the row number is a piece of metadata, and the column header is a metadata. You find that that specific piece of data by going left and down, or
Hmm.
sorry, right and down, and you find that very specific piece of data. So the metadata needs for that document, which is unstructured, is way different than the structured. And there's two ways you can do a document. You can do the kind of like the librarian method, where you give a little card that has all the metadata on it, and you stick it on top, and you kind of index it. Or you go through the document, and in line, every time you see George Washington, you tag it, and it's in there, and then you can extract those out later, and entity extraction. Um, so yes, that's a huge challenge, and I think that the more we go towards the shorter, simpler, it started with Twitter. Let's shrink things down to 120 characters and sound bites and web pages that aren't full narratives. We're kind of putting a lot of structure on things, and those big documents that are out there, I think, aren't getting the love and attention that they need, and figuring out how to extract that information in a way that it makes it easily searchable and findable, and understand the context of, say, George Washington in that document. Are you talking about the bridge, the president, somebody else that wasn't the president? So,
Right. Well, it's also going to be really interesting to see people how people understand summarization now that LLMs, large language model AI, is suddenly pervasive, and so many of us can experiment with it. And we see that the act of summarization is not all that we assumed. And that's a lot of what I think you're talking about is, well, any of us who are working with some sort of document or information representation, we are summarizing, whether it's a single metadata term or an abstract or an AI generated summary. And they're not all the same. And they have different costs and different value.
correct. That is correct. So, just and they all have their place and they all work together, right? So an AI can be informed by say an ontological effort in that structured data to add to its body of knowledge, if you will. And I'm using air quotes for a body of knowledge for an AI. And at the same turn, an AI can make that body of knowledge by extracting everything. So I would say if you need very high precision data, I would still have something that's human reviewed
Hmm.
and create it as a human, and then you could feed it to or use it however. Um, uh, I haven't done the research or know yet how accurate AI is yet to be able to extract that information and say, yep, this is good. But if you just need something in, that gets you in the ballpark, yes, AI is wonderful.
Well, so if you're listening to Ren and I going on at this very kind of abstract level, ranging from the classic Greek philosophers to the various shades of metadata and representation to now large language models. First of all, thanks for bearing with us. But this is complicated stuff. It's hard to describe whether on a podcast or because of the multidimensional nature of this beast of ontology and representation. It's hard to just describe in a work setting when you actually have some potential of taking advantage of it. That said, that's kind of what Ren and some of the other people in our program are going to be talking about at Enterprise UX in June. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to reward you when you come back with a little bit more concreteness about how this actually may be put to work at your job. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. Hey, it's Lou. What am I promoting this time? A new conference, Enterprise UX 2023. Wait a minute, you've heard of Enterprise UX before. Yep, that's the name of the conference. First big one we ever did back in 2015. We're bringing it back in 2023. Why? Because people who work in large enterprises, whether you're a designer, a researcher, a writer, are struggling to amplify your impact, struggling to scale up for enterprise class challenges. But there's all these great new tools and techniques and practices that are maturing that can help you do that scaling up. One is systems thinking, another is information architecture, another is AI, another is designing with data. Those are the four themes we're covering at Enterprise UX 2023 virtual conference taking place June 6th and June 7th. We're going to dig deeply into each of those four areas in ways that help you learn from them, benefit from them, but do so without destroying the planet, because they are scary if in the wrong hands. So come join us at Enterprise UX 2023. We've also got a couple great keynoters, Greg Petroff and Yvetta Sampson joining us. I hope you'll join us too. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm with Ren Pope. We were talking very abstract stuff around ontology. And thank you, dear listener, for bearing with us. But it's partly just to indulge me. It's like the area I used to hang out in before I became a conference producer and book publisher. I just frankly had to move out of this stuff, Ren, because it just wasn't tangible, and I wanted to make things. But I think today it's a little different, because if I'm an IC at a large enterprise, there are like a bunch of people down the hall who've got their fingers on the controls for maybe a big content management system. There are other people who may be looking at using auto classification or auto categorization tools, maybe to start bringing some of that metadata to the surface, some of that meaning to the surface. What can I be doing, or what are people in my position starting to do to really benefit from ontology broadly, or better IA at an enterprise level?
Right. So it doesn't have to be that big, hairy theoretical um, concept. You can use what I call ontological thinking in your day-to-day practice, and you don't have to be an ontologist or a taxonomist or even an information architect to do some of these things. And you might actually, as an individual contributor, might actually be doing some of this already. But if you kind of step back and kind of take a look at it in a different sort of nuance, and Lou, you touched on it about go out and find all the nouns, right? Go out and find all the verbs, and
Extract
then
those entities.
exactly, and then, but the most important thing I think is what is what is your scope, your domain? What are you trying to accomplish? Because that makes the whole difference. So write that down. Write down the reason I'm doing this is because so that we can do something. I think that's the most important step
Well, I'm sorry, I
because
just want to add to that because it's just like
Mhm.
AI is more effective in narrow domains where there's less ambiguity in the semantics. The same is true here, right? I mean, in
Exactly.
a narrow domain, your job will be easier.
Right. So if you just go out and start collecting information and you don't have that kind of scope or domain that you're thinking about, then you may be over collecting. So for example, if we think back to the whole, you have Susan the mother, Bob the son, and you collect that they're mother and son, but they're your whole purpose is their work environment.
Hmm.
You've over collected. You don't need to know that. So focus your scope, and that could be even if your content management system is um totally something fictitious here, a cookbook kind of like ingredients and things, but
Hmm.
you get wound up on some other part of the aspect or content that you're looking for, then you're being inefficient. So really have that good framework of your domain. Then after you do that, go out and get the nouns and get the verbs and how they interact between each other, and also get that metadata, the quality of those nouns and verbs. Again, you could collect all the metadata in the world, but you really want to be focused on the task at hand. Um, and then once you have that, I think that can kind of help narrow down what you're thinking. The other thing too is, because things change over time so much, is have a way of maintaining it. Because um, when I said enduring, I also like to use the word sustainable. You capture something right now in the now, but it's going to change. And if you don't have the system to keep it up, that governance process, it's going to get stale and no one's going to use it. So you have to do that as well too.
And
Um,
I'll put in a plug for Lisa Welchman's Managing Chaos book we published some years ago, which is all about digital
mhm,
governance. Um, so, okay, if I'm in the cookbook or the recipe business, it's important to know things like ingredients, but I don't necessarily need to capture information about whether the eggs are grown by, at free range, from free range chickens versus chickens that, um, whatever, are great dancers. Who knows what? It's immaterial, and then I don't need to know necessarily that although there are containers for ingredients, those are not relevant. So I don't need to gather those nouns about the containers that it came in a egg crate or a shrink wrapped container or whatever it might be.
correct.
All right,
Right.
so
Exactly.
it's a lot of it is a process of elimination, what to keep and what to throw away. But even
Right.
then, it's complicated, right? So you said
Hmm.
to be sustainable, for it to endure, it needs to be captured in a way that it can be managed. And
Correct.
I think sort of the other side of that coin is it has to be represented. We're talking about multidimensional spaces, and I'm guessing, whether the representation is visual, like an ontology map, or textual, like a data dictionary. None of these are perfect. What have you been finding works well to manage and represent an ontology, if anything?
Well, yeah, there is, and that's you bring that up. It's funny because that's one of the things I wanted to talk about at Enterprise UX is I think that the knowledge representation space, the user experience, and let's call it experience in general, hasn't really caught up or matured in that area. And I think as UX practitioners, we need to all hands on deck and get there and help out the community. So there's several things. It depends. At the enterprise level, you want a heavy duty tool. So if you work at a very large organization, you want something called a knowledge organization system. And they're a specialized content management system that deals with relational kind of like, I don't want to say it's so bad that relational databases are kind of like the old way,
Hmm.
graph type knowledge. So the traditional, when you see nodes and lines in between them, that kind of network view, that's at the enterprise level. Then there's some content management systems and some other, I guess, personal information management systems that kind of help in knowledge representation too. So if you're like a small business or a consultant, those knowledge organization systems cost tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. You might not be able to afford that, but there's actually even things at the lower level that you can use and
So
to
there's stuff
represent.
out there. It's
Oh yeah.
basically a different kind of content management system.
Yeah, definitely. And even if so, if you're, it's a very something very small. You're an information architect doing something for a mom and pop pet store, and you need to have a knowledge representation of all the different pets that they have. Um, you could use a tool like CMAP, because their environment might be very static. Or you could use something like Mind Mapper
Hmm.
to show that. And then as you go, if you're consulting or you work in enterprise, some of the knowledge organization systems would be something like Synaptica's Graphite, or Semaphore, which is made by MarkLogic, Pool Party. Uh, um, if you're into doing something like a taxonomy, data access. So I'm
I'll
giving
note
all
that
these.
Ren has not said, "Oh, go out and create a Excel spreadsheet."
Well, that's funny too. You can, you might be able to. So I was kind of going more for the visual, but I've done stuff in PowerPoint before.
Wow.
And one of the very first knowledge systems I did, this is going on 30 years ago. The tools weren't out there, and I was challenged by my boss. We need to have a way of representing knowledge across our organization. We had about 17,000 employees, and so this is at the enterprise level. 17,000 employees, and his challenge was his predecessor used to have the Thursday meeting. It started at 8 o'clock and it usually ended around 4 o'clock, where he was it was pretty much the CEO would gather all of his division directors together, and the entire day they'd go through 300 slides.
Mm.
So the organization had that mental model of that's what we do on Thursdays. New boss came in and says, I don't want that. I don't even want to meet. So I want a system that condenses those 300 slides down to, is it good? Is it bad? We only focus on the bad. And if even let's just say, I could say I don't even want to have the meeting. I push a button, a VTC pops up with the people that had the bad slides. I get to go over it with them. 5 minutes, we're done. So we put together something in PowerPoint that would aggregate all the data, give you a thumbs up, thumbs down on it, and you could get on with the day. The directors and everybody danced with joy about that. So yeah, you could even use the tool that is, sometimes you have to use a hammer as a screwdriver, when you don't have a screwdriver. So
Uh,
you have to figure out how.
anything you do that gets rid of day-long meetings, it will be celebrated widely. Um, you know, I really have seen a lot of people using tools like Airtable and Smartsheet more and more because they, have that sort of mental model of the table that, spreadsheets are built around, but then they manage to add in some multidimensionality and in some clever
Mhm.
ways because there is a, relational database backing them up. Um, it's it's like I'm just sort of like shaking my head. You all can't see me do this, but in some respects, the tools get better, but the challenges still remain the same, and in a way, maybe get harder because the scale of what people are dealing with in terms of volume and complexity and the sort of the unevenness of the enterprise environment is just kind of more and more and more all the time. I hope and you've been doing this for like 30 years, Ren. Like, do you feel like the challenges are getting easier, harder, about the same? Like, can the technology actually help us keep up with the volume and
Yeah.
complexity?
Uh, Maybe if I could loosely just take the ethos of Billy Joel, we didn't start the fire. Um, uh, but if you think about it, uh, in the 1950s, they said computers and technology will, we won't be working, by the year 2000. And Star Trek had that notion of in the future, no one will work because technology will have it there. We will always have the challenges. The things will, it's a never ending cycle because we can take on more complex challenges. It the We will just have to, that's the next step. Then there's more challenges and we figure out the complexity there. So we will always be employed as
Hmm.
people. We will always have challenges, and the systems become more and more technical. Now, I will say that as user experience comes along, and we smooth out we have a search bar now, which
Hmm.
is just amazing. You don't have to come up with some sort of search algorithm, you just type stuff in. I think that will become more pervasive, and a lot more things will become easier, but then we go on to the next challenge. And I just like to say something else real quick about tools,
Sure.
just very quickly. So I think, as practitioners, we need to be tool savvy, in the sense of knowing the nuances of the tool and extracting as much out as possible. And those tools serve us to make good artifacts, so that whoever our customer is, and I really think as information architects, user experience folks, we think of the users as our customer, but we are the people who make the designs for the people who build it, and
Hmm.
think of those in mind. So the developers, the computer scientists. So if we're not working in concert with them and giving them the best things that we can, the good artifacts, then it's going to be inefficient, or they're not going to be able to use what we put out. So we need to be good with our tools and understand them, and understand what happens when you're using Airtable, understand what happens when you're using some sort of wireframing tool or what have you. So
Well, that's the truth of the enterprise environment is who are the users? Well, that's a really loaded question in an enterprise setting. Hey, Ren, this has been great. I like that we managed to kind of squeeze in both the hand wavy conceptual and the down in the trenches discussion about what you can actually do. If you're listening in, this is some of the material that Ren is going to get into at Enterprise UX June 6th and 7th. Ren is part of a cluster, a cohort of speakers and talks on IA and knowledge management, along with Milan Gunther, who's going to be talking about, actually, it's probably relevant to what we were just talking about, Ren, his new, it's called Edgy. It's like a new language for representing, I think it's enterprise, maybe at an ontology level, but definitely nouns and I think some verbs. And
excellent.
just I think it just came out a few days ago. And Sarah Barrett, who's going to be talking as like the lead information architecture at a little company called Microsoft. We also have, besides this great group of IA people, We have a cluster of people talking about systems thinking, another talking about designing with data, and another talking about AI and machine learning. And all of them are talking about how those 4 areas can help you do a better job as a UX person, a practitioner in an enterprise environment. So it will be fabulously useful. But there's one more thing we want you to have besides a ticket to this conference, and that's a gift from our guest today, Ren. Ren, in Rosenfeld Review tradition, what gift did you bring for our listeners?
Well, I've been very fortunate for over the past 3 years to have been on an advisory board for a company called Mettle Health, run by the amazing Dr. BJ Miller. He's a TED speaker, world famous. He just came out with a book, A Beginner's Guide to the End, which talks about palliative care and hospice. And especially with the coming out of the pandemic, there were a lot of palliative care challenges, and the palliative care community, which are the healthcare providers, family members, and the actual patients, it's just been very challenging. So he's trying to get more awareness, better tools for the caregivers, and working on a body of knowledge. So I've been working with him. So I strongly suggest looking him up, listening to his TED Talks. He has an amazing story.
And the organization is
And
Mettle Health,
Mettle Health.
METTLE?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. All right.
And so he provides counseling for patients and family members if they're having difficulties with their local. It is all virtual. If in their space, if they need just some extra help and some high-powered counseling, and he also helps to train the actual healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, and other professionals.
Excellent.
So definitely
I'm glad,
excellent.
and I'm glad you're using your vast expertise to help out with developing that body of knowledge.
Excellent. Thank you. My pleasure.
And thanks for joining us today, Ren Pope. Great to have you on the Rosenfeld Review. Thanks again.
Thank you. The pleasure was all mine. This was great.
Hey, it's Lou. Thank you for listening to the latest Rosenfeld Review podcast. I really appreciate it. I would love to hear from you. And if you want to pop me an email, lou@rosenfeldmedia.com, tell me what you thought. Better yet, leave me the hell alone and post a review on your favorite podcast platform. Please feed the algorithm. It really does make a difference. We want to get the word out. If you like the word, give us a hand. And while I'm asking you for favors, don't forget, buy books. Support your favorite local independent publisher. We happen to be one, rosenfeldmedia.com. All those great UX books are there. So, thanks again.